Welcome back to another video here on Keep Running with BK, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about my return to Maffetone Training Method. It's a low heart rate training method that I think is a perfect fit for me for this summer, and if you stick around I'm going to share some thoughts why I think MAF makes sense going into summer training with heat and humidity. We'll share that right after this. So I discovered MAF or Maffetone Training Method back in the summer of 2020 during the pandemic. I was working a lot. As many of you know, through this pandemic, many of us felt trapped indoors, going a little stir crazy. And maybe you, like me, started listening to and watching a lot more YouTube about various things. And one of those things was I just started watching videos about running, something I've been doing for 38 years now, and I feel there's always something new to learn. And I had never heard of the MAF training method until last summer, so I started watching videos, I started reading about it on the internet, and now I've even got the book here, and I've started reading through it to really understand it a little bit more firsthand from Dr. Phil Maffetone's writing. And you know, when I started reading about this, I committed to a 3-month trial period to give it a shot and just see. I've tried many different training approaches. My training wasn't necessarily going all that well at the time anyways, and 3.5 months after starting, I was able to build up my mileage and decided, you know, let's give this a shot. And I actually completed my first 50K ultra marathon. And as this summer approaches and I'm thinking of returning back to 100% MAF training, I've already got the idea of starting to research 1 or 2 ultra marathons for later this year in the fall to give it another go around. So that's why I'm talking today about returning to MAF training. You know, I started the MAF training last June, so I'm actually in about a month, a little over a month, I'm coming up on 1 year since starting the method. So I'm looking forward to sharing you thoughts 1 year later. I'll share some of those benefits, I'll share some of the insights, and I'll share some things that I think I still need to learn. And in fact, that's really part of this video's theme in my return to MAF. You know, last year, most of what I shared about MAF was based on just what I had seen and heard from other people and what I was learning as I was getting into it. This summer, as I return to MAF training, I'm actually going to be digging into the book and have some additional insights I hope to share with you. But I'm also learning a lot, and I want to share some of the progress that I've made and where I still think I need to go. You know, in January of this year, I actually was transitioning away from MAF training. So I've been doing MAF training for 7 months, and I transitioned to more of an 80-20 approach, where 80% of my running was to be easy, where I used the MAF principles and that low heart rate training to satisfy that, and then up to 20% of it was returning to doing speed work and harder efforts. And I've shared quite a bit about that in recent videos, about some of the time trials I did at the 10K and the half marathon. And my last video that I shared last week was actually what were my thoughts after a 3-month 80-20 training block. So make sure to check that out if you have any interest there. But then in late April, I actually started transitioning back to 100% MAF, and that is the planned approach that I have for this summer. So I know that many of you that stumble upon this channel or stumbled upon my videos are interested in MAF training, because they are by far the most popular videos that I've done, and by far the ones with the most views. And so I hope that you will find the next, over the next few months, as I share more about MAF, that there'll be some more things on the topic for you. If you're interested in checking that out and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, why don't you consider subscribing? And if you want to be notified when new videos are posted up, click on the bell. And if you have been following MAF training or looking into it and you have questions that you'd like for me to think about and maybe share more about as I do additional videos on that, please share that in the comments so that I can be thinking about those things as I return to this approach, and when I'm out there running and I'm thinking about, you know, what I'm learning and what to share here, I can consider your questions as well. You know, MAF training in its very basics is a low heart rate training method, and the idea is to slow down because most of us, myself included, run too hard too often. And even when we run what we believe is easy, oftentimes we find out, unless you have a heart rate monitor strapped to your chest and you're actually measuring what your heart rate is, even what we thought was easy oftentimes is still too hard. And I think the MAF training method is a great approach to help us to really slow down and understand what easy truly is, because what are we trying to accomplish with MAF? You know, MAF stands for maximum aerobic function. We're trying to develop our aerobic capacity, and our aerobic capacity is when we're engaging our slow twitch muscle fibers, which is critical for any endurance athlete. Those are the workhorses, and they work in an aerobic system. They work at an aerobic effort, and often what people find when they try Maffetone training levels, they get frustrated and they struggle with, this seems awfully slow. And I think as I'm reading the book, the impression I'm getting is that should be an indicator to us, not that the method doesn't work, but that our slow twitch muscle fibers, our aerobic capacity, our aerobic function is actually pretty anemic. It's not as fit as many of us would like to believe, because we can go out and we can run hard, we can go out and hammer and run a lot faster, and that seems to work for us, but we're really engaging a lot of those fast twitch muscle fibers that rely more on a carbohydrate, sugar-based fuel, and we're constantly having to take gels and other things to kind of refuel as we're doing it to try to maintain that. And you can do that. I did it for years. But one of the things that I found is that, man, I was awfully tired. I was sore more often than not after those efforts. And I wasn't, looking back now, I realized I wasn't fully recovering. And although I could make gains, oftentimes it led to injury, or oftentimes it led to a plateau and then a decline and then frustration and other challenges, because I was relying heavily on an anaerobic system with an anemic, underdeveloped aerobic system. And that's really what MAF does. I liken it to, you know, when you get into the weight room and you're doing some weight training, one of the things that you might be going into the weight training room to do is to develop maybe an area of, you know, your muscle development that's weak, that needs to be strengthened. So you do isolated exercises to develop those particular muscles. I think in one sense that's a visual for me when I think of MAF, is if you have an underdeveloped aerobic system, you want to do what you can to isolate the aerobic system, to really focus on it and to really develop those slow twitch muscle fibers, which is what MAF does. And so I've done other videos on MAF as far as the basics. I'll put a link up to that. But when you do MAF, you use a heart rate monitor. You calculate your MAF target heart rate, which at a very high level is 180 minus your age, and then there's a few factors to consider to do some minor adjustments to that. But when you get above that target heart rate, Dr. Maffetone's research shows that's when you begin to engage more and more anaerobic aspects of that system, and staying below that is when you're really focusing on an aerobic system, and that's why you train at or below your MAF target heart rate. And the idea is, as you develop your aerobic capacity, that'll carry over into becoming a better endurance athlete. And you're able to measure your progress through a monthly MAF test, where over time, as you're building this system, you're able to run further and faster at the same heart rate. And that's how we measure progress. And I think one of the key reasons why you hear that the heart rate monitor and measuring your heart rate is a factor that's brought into this approach and brought into this is factors, because it's not the only indicator but it is a fairly reliable indicator that we can fairly easily measure with a heart rate monitor. And it gives us an indication as to the stresses that our bodies is doing, the amount of effort it's taking for our bodies to do what it is that we're doing, whether it's running, biking, cycling, really anything. But it also can give us an indication of when we may need to back off further, so that we don't risk overtraining, or that we're not fully recovering from our runs and we may need to back off a little bit. So it's a tool that we learn how to use effectively to help us to improve our running. One of the reasons I'm returning to MAF training in the summer is with heat and humidity is a stress factor that my body has to deal with. And it doesn't make sense then for me to try to push hard in the summer dealing with all those stresses, where I can just slow down, use the heart rate monitor to help me to get a good quality training out of my running. It's going to be a good time for me to gradually and slowly build up my mileage. Right now I'm averaging about 35 miles a week. And this summer I'd like to be averaging about 40 to 45 miles a week. And MAF training will help me to increase that volume safely. But it's also appropriate as I'm thinking about wanting to run an ultra marathon, where I may be out there 6-7 hours running on the trails, and I need to be able to be on my feet. I need to be able to do a higher volume. I need to be able to pace myself and be mentally prepared to be running for a long time. And so, along with returning to MAF and slowing down this summer, I also hope to do more of my long runs when I can on the trails, just to get more of that type of setting and experience and dealing with the stresses that are involved with that. And I'm also looking at adding an extra day in my of running into my week. So I'll be running 6 days a week, and I want to do that gradually. I want to do that safely. Those are some changes which add stress, and so MAF is perfect for me to keep things in check. Ultimately for me, MAF training requires a long-term view. I want to continue to make improvement over the long haul because I want to run for a long time. I've already been running for almost 4 decades. I would like to run for another decade or two, God willing, and that my body holds up. But that's only going to happen if I take care of myself, listen to my body, and the MAF training has been very good to me. Not only rejuvenating my running, but I'm also learning to take better care of myself. My fitness is improving, but maybe even more importantly, my overall health is improving. I've experienced, weight loss, good weight loss, not unhealthy amount of weight loss, but good weight loss. I'm recovering more completely. I'm recovering quicker. I'm not feeling achy and sore all the time. And although I've had some minor injuries, if you will, that I'm dealing with because I've adapted to the method, shorter stride and things like that, in the big scheme of things, I have not experiencing major injuries, so I'm able to be more consistent with my running, which is also one of those benefits that we look for in a training approach. So I'm looking forward to sharing more insights with you, not only about running here on the channel, but also about MAF this summer. If you have any questions, again, I just want to remind you, post those down in the comments so I can be thinking about them and share with you responses in these videos. And if you liked what you heard or you got something out of it, please give a like. That will help just create awareness to the channel, create awareness to the videos that people are finding value in, and to help grow the Keep Running community. So I got a lot more to share with you. I'm looking forward to it. We got this year since I started MAF coming up. I'm looking forward to that. But until next time, stay safe, train smart, and keep running.